Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pod in the Park. This is going to be episode 5. My name is Cameron Kempsey, and I'm here once again with my co-host, Marsha Woodmancy. Today, we're going to go on to a topic that has been prevalent in our society for a long time, but has become into the forefront of everyone's minds in the past few weeks. The topic today is going to be activism. What is activism? How can you do it? Is there a way to do it passively? These are all going to be questions that we're going to be trying to answer today. So let's get right into it. Marshall, activism has been a part of your identity for a long time. So I want to know, how do you define it personally? What is activism, and what are some examples that you've done in your life about activism?
Great question. Activism is the act of doing something for the betterment of your community. I really do see activism as a local thing. You can be an activist on a large scale, but in my personal life, my focus has been local action. Like I mentioned a couple episodes ago, I was homeschooled to the age of 14. That really allowed me to take time to do things in my community. That was my education. So I was going to city council meetings at San Jose since I was about 7. Now, they're held at 1:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, so you either have to be retired or homeschooled to attend. Luckily, I was one of those. From there, I did half a decade in youth and government, which I highly encourage all high schoolers to check out. It's through the YMCA, a really intense mock legislature and court. We went to Sacramento for a week, so I was sitting in the desks of the actual legislators. We created real legislation. Some of my main legislations that I created were around physician-assisted suicide for those who are terminally ill. It was a long time ago, but some driving and some other related things. But from then, the past 3 years, since I was about a senior in high school, it's really ramped up after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting in Florida, where 17 of our brothers and sisters and our teachers lost their lives to gun violence. And that was after a string of highly traumatic gun violence in schools. That was the first time that I had seen my generation really step up in the power and energy in it. And since then, it's kind of been a snowball effect. But it's been a great experience. It's been both protesting in the streets, organizing behind the scenes, donating, campaigning, working on campaigns, really kind of all encompassing. Now, Cameron, I know you come from a different background. You were a public school student who couldn't attend city council meetings, right? Because you were in school.
I was in school learning. Okay.
Not summer, but anyway. And your mother's also very active as well, but in different ways. So how would you encompass your experience?
Yeah. So, activism really hasn't been, a core part of my identity. As you, I have been to the protests, I've been to the rallies, I've actually been to a city council meeting with you, which is actually really freaking interesting, to sort of like see how our local government works. And it kind of
or doesn't work.
works. I was just there listening, and I was like, this is what they get paid for. But besides the point. So the one way, or the thing that got me really into activism, that gave me a sort of foundation and a first glimpse into it, was Project Now. So Project Now was a kind of a small little organization that Marshall and I started about 2 years ago, a year and a half, something like that, right? Project Now was a way to get youth, and pretty much anyone in the area, but it was mainly focused on youth, bringing them together for creative discussion and political action. Right, those were our main core pillars that we sort of abide to. What it sort of really showed me was that there are people out there, that I never knew about, that are my age and care about those local issues, and that actually want to do something about it. And it was really awesome because I've never been in that kind of situation before, where it was young kids talking about community issues, transportation, gardening, housing development, and it really sort of kind of propelled me into, it is very serious to want to help your community and try to make it better. So I just learned a lot about public issues, and I haven't really been active in that way since as much. But now you're starting this podcast, and I'm trying to be as an activist as much as I can by having these type of conversations.
Do you think that we could kind of boil down our different experiences with saying that your level of activism is very much, especially as a young person, it's very much dependent on your life experiences, right? The path that you're
Right.
given. And it's actually kind of questionable is why is it that our public school students are excluded from political action, right? I mean, they're only kids, right? So if you want them to do something, you have to actually give it to them, right?
Right.
And you were not given political action. And that raises the question, well, why, right?
So
Why is the vast majority of our population of young people excluded?
I like what you're going with that, because it really resonates with me. You were homeschooled and that you didn't really have that formal education that standardized education that everyone has. But you were able to be that member of your community and able to do those things to, you know, learn about the community issues, and pretty much everyone in the community, right? Because were forced to volunteer, you were forced to go out and be a part of your community. While I, being a public school student, had to go to school every day and learn. And you're right, I wasn't given, that option. I learned about like the political system, and I sat in a classroom, all day and stuff like that. But yeah, I really wasn't able. I would have to force myself, or someone would have to really push myself to go and participate in those community events and things like that. And so I really see that, yeah, this idea of standardized formal education that we all praise doesn't really necessarily make you the best member of your community.
And the last thing I want to say on that, on being engaged, is to everybody watching this, whether you identify more with Cameron's experiences or with mine or anywhere in between or anywhere outside of it, engagement is not easy right now. And Cameron knows it, I know it. And so if you're questioning how engaged you are, don't worry. And if you want to find out more ways you can get engaged, come to us. We'll probably just tell you the negatives about engagement, but together and with our friends and family, we're building more streams for engagement, and this is one of them.
Right. So with that idea that like public school students, or just like people who aren't really given that opportunity to be expressive and be an activist and be part of your like community, there's like something that they do, or like a form of activism that they partake in. Like active is in the name of activism, right? So my question to you is like, is there a way to be like a passive activist that like maybe these public school students or people that aren't given that opportunity partake in, because they're not able to go out and do the things that you've done and other
Right.
people have done in the community?
Passive activism is I think it grows in popularity as activism grows in popularity. There's probably like an
Okay.
equal and opposite growth, right? Because you're not passive about something unless it's actively in your mind, right? Otherwise, you're just not an activist, right? If you're not hearing
Right.
about any action, you're just not an activist if that's not what you're inclined to do. Now, there's a subset of us, like we're doing a podcast talking about activism all the time, right? So we are activists in our daily lives because of our conversations, right? And because of our actions. But now that activism is growing, we're also seeing a larger number of passive activists, which can sometimes be referred to slacktivists, which Cameron can kind of go into. Can you define slacktivist?
So
It's
like
kind of a new term.
Right. So like slacktivism, or a slacktivist, is someone who is in the pursuit of awareness to a social issue via social media and like other internet communication channels. And what slacktivism really kind of derives the meaning of like slacktivism is they're doing it for their own personal gratification and satisfaction. It's like, for example, like I don't know if you see a horrible video on like Facebook of like rhinos going extinct, and how like poachers are just killing them for their ivory horns, and just ravaging their populations in Africa. You see that video and you go, oh my god, that's terrible, and you hit share, send it on your feed, and you're like, I've done something. I just showed my followers that there's problems in Africa, with rhinos. Just that isolated example. And what that did was, all that did was gave you the feel good feeling of, I just helped that cause by sharing it. But you're not being an activist, you're being passive in it. And that's where slacktivism comes. You're slacking off and you're not doing the necessary things that you need to be able to do.
And I think that type of, that ideology that our generation and the ones that come before and after us, millennials and whatnot, Gen Z, that I feel like it's commonly thought that we follow that self-gratification
Right.
uh, through the things that our ancestors used to do. Well, now we're just doing it for our own personal benefit, like working and school and activism and family and friends and entertainment. It's perceived that all those things are self-gratifying. And I have I've questioned people's intent when they do repost videos of, oh, save the kelp or save the corals. It's like, well, what does it actually do? Now, what it does do is, and I'd wonder, this social uprising that we're seeing, thousands of young people who have never protested before, and that's because I've asked them, have you gone to a protest before? I haven't asked thousands of people, but I've taken a random sample size, and a lot of them say this is my first protest. What impact did those meaningless, objectively meaningless reposts have on that person's willingness to really take action? And that's something that we don't know yet. But I am willing to keep a positive note.
Right.
But keep in your mind that reposting the story about corals doesn't actually help the corals at all.
Right. Right.
But as long as it's in your mind and you're not being distracted by it, it's a good thing.
So I think like what you just said right there is like, okay, we have to see like what that actually did. I think when you repost that and then you get that gratification that you just did something to help that cause, it actually hurts you because you just said, I already did enough, and you won't take that extra step. Just for that example, like to help the corals, like stop using single-use plastic because it just ends up in our ocean. Everyone should know that majority of our plastic just ends up in the ocean, right? So instead of just reposting, really take the time to think and be like, I need to alter little aspects of my life. Not full on shift, but little aspects of my life to help that, right?
Yeah, and just building off of that, I mean, because I think this is a good conversation.
Yeah.
I hope you're all enjoying this. I've always been one, and Cameron as well, to make changes in our personal life.
Right.
But I think what we're seeing now, especially with Black Lives Matter, is that it doesn't, your own personal anti-racism is important, but you have to spread your anti-racism to those around you, right? So maybe, like Cameron said, we've all heard, okay, reduce plastic consumption, but now's the time to be an activist about reducing plastic consumption and take a page out of me and Cameron's book, not to say that our book's perfect, but rally some friends on a Zoom call, which seems super cheesy, but you could put it on your damn resume, right? We had a Zoom conference where we discussed ways to limit our plastic consumption. We created a mock Instagram campaign with a couple. That is so impactful, not because you're making an impact on plastic consumption, which you're not, right? I'm sorry, you didn't take a plastic fork today. Good job. It sends signals to your brain that it's important not to use plastic.
Right.
But in reality, the greatest signal is to say there's something we can do about it. And that is creating a group, calling your legislators, reading an article, all forms of activism.
Right. So for, some people that, you guys or everyone that might be listening to this might be like, well, I'm really scared, or, I don't really know how to take that next step and really, be a leader in bringing people together for a social cause, right? So is there a specific way to be an activist? Well, yes, but there are certain things that you can do that aren't that, big ticket item that you go off and, you go be a leader in this cause, right? And there's actually 3 sort of main ways that, everyone here can, try to emulate in their life and do to support their, favorite cause. Three things. Number 1, donate your funds. Donate. Because a lot of, groups that are trying to pursue change in these topics, in these problems, they need money to do it. And that's just how our world works, right? They need money to do it. So if you're not the one to go out there and protest, well, you can donate your money that you earned by working, and you can give it to them so that they can make better use of it. Number 2, educate and read. Like, I love this one because, the more informed you are, the more people can have conversations about that. Like Marshall and I are doing right now, having these conversations because we're educated. We look into these topics, and it allows for more discussion. Last one, create. What Marshall and I did. We saw that people needed to, start having these conversations about these big ticket societal issues. So we started a podcast. Project Now, we wanted people to get engaged in the community. Created Project Now. create something. Not saying you have to go and create this podcast or a group, a discussion group, but you can do something that you love to do and that you're passionate about. Create something and use it for good. So,
Yeah, beautifully said. There are no limits to what you can do, and no one expects anything of you, right? So maybe start holding yourself to a higher standard of what activism is, right? And start feeling bad about whatever experience you're in, right? Long for going outside your comfort zone. Me and Cameron are the exact same way. You might look at us and say, wow, I don't know how I could ever get to where they are. I mean, look at my resume, right? But in reality, all we're doing is just pushing our comfort zones by 10% every time. And we're consistently doing it, and it hasn't been an overnight process. But activism is the future, and I am so inspired by what I saw these past couple weeks, seeing young black and brown, boys and girls standing up on the stage for the first time, hosting events, at, drum circles, meditations, protests, walking in the streets, chanting. Power to you. Don't give up. I think a guiding question that I would love for you to think about is, who around you can you build with? I luckily had Cameron. For Project Now, we had at least 3 or 4 other close friends who helped us get it off the ground, played pivotal parts. So who's your team?
Yeah.
Who's your team? Well, thanks so much for listening to Pod in Park, episode 5. We really hope that you gained something from this important and, time-sensitive topic of activism. I will say on the last time-sensitive thing, please do take action during Black Lives Matter. Please protest outside your house. Please take a stand. You don't have to go to the protest. You could stand outside your house with a sign, right? Talk to your parents, talk to your friends, and go check out our links for GoFundMe and our listen review, and have a great rest of your day, folks.